If you belong to that much maligned and oft denigrated generation known as the millennial generation, chances are you are abundantly familiar with a certain cartoon sponge. The little yellow sponge who lives in a pineapple under the sea, SpongeBob Squarepants. By now, wildly ubiquitous, having seeped into almost every conceivable layer of our culture, SpongeBob SquarePants constitutes one of the most successful children's programming television shows ever created. It was a good show, or at least those first few seasons are, I should say, up until 2004 when it all went to shit, after which it all went to shit. But SpongeBob SquarePants was a deceptive cartoon, highly so. It had a lot more under the hood than you might have suspected, including a little bit of philosophy. Now, wait, you may say, are you suggesting that SpongeBob SquarePants, a children's cartoon, actually explored serious adult philosophical concepts? I am suggesting just that. In at least one episode, SpongeBob got decidedly philosophical. And the episode to which I am referring is Squidville. This is an episode that I recall from when I was a kid. I can't even remember how old I was when this came out. But it is an episode that is wildly humorous, perhaps one of the most humorous ones that they ever made. But beyond that, it is an episode of SpongeBob which was decidedly brainy, decidedly insightful, in a manner which I did not understand at the time, of course, being a kid. But now, looking back years down the line, I can truly see, I can truly recognize, and I can truly appreciate the philosophical grandeur that went into the creation of this particular episode of SpongeBob. Now, hold your horses, dear viewer. Allow me to make a case for myself, if you will, and allow me to explain to you why the episode Squidville of the old classic era SpongeBob SquarePants is actually a profound philosophical exploration of some of the concepts and ideas first put forth by one of history's greatest philosophers. So, follow me as I explore the philosophical underpinnings of Squidville. Now, in this episode, SpongeBob and Patrick are being their typical annoying selves and are getting on Squidward's nerves, as they do, as they always do in SpongeBob. And that by playing, in this case, with leaf blowers. And those things are loud as heck and annoying, aren't they? But Squidward has decided that he has had enough. He is done with their bullshit. He has had it up to here with their crap, and he wants to get the heck out. So Squidward packs up and moves to Tentacle Acres, a walled community of like-minded octopi who have decided to turn their backs on the outside world so as to devote themselves to their own pursuits and their own idea of civilization. Now, at the onset, this seems like a really great deal to Squidward. He gets to do his interpretive dance thing. He gets to ride his bike around and partake of all the activities which Tentacle Acres has to offer. At first, it seems like a great move. As you can see in the picture, Squidward is quite happy. He is enamored of his new life in this walled off community in which he is able to associate with those who think like he does. However, over time, something begins to happen. Things slowly begin to sour. Squidward gradually comes to realize that the monotonous tedium which reigns within the walls of Tentacle Acres is actually not quite as fulfilling as once he thought it was. Eventually, he comes to realize that, in the words of Shakespeare, too much of a good thing ain't good. And so, eventually, at the climax of the episode, Squidward rejects his paradise, this newfound utopia in which he thought he had immersed himself. He rejects it by taking up the very implements which he originally fled from in the hands of SpongeBob and Patrick. He realizes that he preferred his old chaotic and unpredictable life to the tedious monotony of Tentacle Acres, the place where he has immersed himself till now. Now, this episode was, it's been decades since this first aired, and I was just, the kid when I saw it, and I thought it was just hilarious at that time, and it still is, it is just as funny now as it was back then. But it was not until years later, that I truly saw the depths that this episode of this unassuming children's show plumbed. And later on, as I began to explore certain aspects of, philosophy in greater depth, I came to realize that this episode of SpongeBob is a phenomenal encapsulation of some of the concepts put forth by none other than Fyodor Dostoyevsky. Now, in 1864, Fyodor Dostoyevsky published his landmark novella, Notes from the Underground, widely regarded as the first piece of existential literature. This brief novella, was written as a rebuttal to the 1863 novel, What Is to Be Done, by one Nikolai Chernyshevsky, a utopian socialist and one of the leading figures in the Russian nihilist movement. Nikolai Chernyshevsky's novel, What Is to Be Done, was a political novel which postulated that rational thinking and scientific reasoning, when applied to the whole of society, could eventually lead to the development of a utopia, an earthly paradise. Now, this marks the difference between Chernyshevsky's optimism and Dostoyevsky's cynicism. Notes from the Underground being written to refute primarily all the assertions which Chernyshevsky postulated in his own book. However, history, I believe, has more than vindicated Dostoyevsky as the superior thinker. And I believe that his cynicism, although a bit more pessimistic, has more than proven itself to be much more insightful, psychologically speaking, than Chernyshevsky's book, What Is to Be Done. In Dostoyevsky's Notes from the Underground, he comments quite a bit upon rationality and upon freedom and upon how these things intermix or don't intermix when it comes to human society and the human psyche. Specifically, in Notes from the Underground, Dostoyevsky says, Man likes to make roads and to create. That is a fact beyond dispute. But why has he such a passionate love for destruction and chaos also? Tell me that. But on that point, I want to say a couple of words myself. May it not be that he loves chaos and destruction, there can be no disputing that he does sometimes love it, because he is instinctively afraid of attaining his object and completing the edifice he is constructing. Furthermore, he goes on to say, you see, gentlemen, reason is an excellent thing. There's no disputing that. But reason is nothing but reason and satisfies only the rational side of man's nature, while will is a manifestation of the whole life, that is, of the whole human life, including reason and all the impulses. To boil it down into its simplest premise, Notes from the Underground can be summarized in one succinct statement: that freedom is not always rational. This constitutes one of Dostoyevsky's most penetrative looks into the human condition, the relationship or non-relationship, if you will, between freedom and rationality. Dostoyevsky comes to the conclusion that oftentimes freedom is not a rational exercise, but that humans will choose it nonetheless. Now, Dostoyevsky's outlook is a decidedly Christian one. In so being, freedom is often regarded as the exercise of free will, I should say, is often regarded in this theological outlook as being the ultimate irrational act, as the book of Genesis makes clear. The exercise of free will is often in direct contrast to one's own best interest. However, humans often choose to make incredibly stupid decisions, even though those decisions do run contrary to their better interests. But they do it because they want freedom. Now, Nikolai Chernyshevsky's novel, What Is to Be Done, would seem to suggest that in order to achieve the utopia which he believes could be achieved, the earthly paradise of collective strivance for humanity's betterment, uh, humans would have to overcome uh, both their self-interest, but also some of the flaws that are inherent in their character. Um, Predominantly, self-interest being foremost among them, but greed, avarice, such like that. Aspects of the human character which have often been a hindrance in the past, but which, if Chernyshevsky is to be believed, would have to be overcome. However, that would, in a way, eliminate some of the very foundational tenets of humanity itself. Um, some things which Dostoevsky is postulating, in contrast to Chernyshevsky, is inherent to humanity, and that humanity cannot exist without it. That is to say, Dostoevsky is defending the irrationality of human decisions and the prioritizing of freedom above uh, one's own best interest or society's best interest, because freedom is the foundation of human happiness, as Dostoevsky asserts in Notes from the Underground. Now, in Japanese aesthetics, there is a concept called Wabi-Sabi, which is a worldview based, or an aesthetic worldview based around the appreciation of beauty that is flawed, imperfect, or impermanent in nature. This I find to be quite compatible, or quite complementary, I should say, with Dostoevsky's uh, assertions in Notes from the Underground. Dostoevsky viewed man as a deeply flawed animal. However, he also seemed to defend some of those flaws as being necessary for individual happiness. Um, that being that freedom is of the most paramount importance when it comes to personal happiness, and that in order to achieve the type of utopia which Nikolai Chernyshevsky was postulating, one would have to do away with that. But if one did, and the paradise of Chernyshevsky was adopted, and life was reduced to um, a mechanized structure of um, planning and logic only, could people really be said to be free? If mankind did exist in a world in which every decision was delegated to them based on outside circumstances, such as and those outside circumstances being predicated upon what is in their best interest, could you really be said to be free? If life was reduced to cold logic and scientific calculation, could man truly be said to be free? When every choice that he makes is dictated to him by his circumstances. Dostoyevsky would assert no. And he would also assert that you wouldn't want to live in any kind of world where you can't be free. So, how does this relate to Squidville, the episode of SpongeBob Squarepants, which I have highlighted here to be compatible with Dostoevsky's theories? Well, it is a perfect embodiment of those theories because Squidward immerses himself in a Chernyshevskian utopia, or at least so he thinks at the beginning. Everything is rigidly structured. Everything runs like clockwork. And to its credit, everyone seems to have more than what, or at least enough of what they need. No one goes hungry. Everyone gets ample exercise. Everyone gets to partake of the activities which they enjoy. But Squidward eventually realizes over the course of his stay in Tentacle Acres that he is not free, nor is anyone there. And he quickly begins to realize that life without freedom is not much life at all. And so he eventually rejects that which he at first embraced because he realized that it is antithetical to his own individual happiness. So he thereby reverts to his previous chaotic and unpredictable life because variety is, after all, the spice of life. And he understands that even though it's not always, even though things don't always go according to his whims, happiness cannot be found in monotonous rigidity, but only in an environment in which freedom can be adequately exercised. And so I suppose I will leave this spurious kind of uh, out of left field video with a quote not by Dostoevsky or by SpongeBob SquarePants, but rather by one of the greatest rock bands of all time, the Eagles. They call it paradise. I don't know why. You call someplace paradise, kiss it goodbye.